Hello and welcome to our Ghouls virtual birthday party. Thank you so much for tuning in. It has probably been a little while since you have seen a few of us, but we are back better than ever and very, very excited to bring you a full day of events. It's going to be very, very busy. We have not one, not two, but 6 events happening today. So today we're going to be kicking off our virtual party with a little welcome back to Ghouls with some of our amazing Ghouls team who I'm joined with today. We're going to be talking about why horror matters more than ever. Very important topic. Just to give you a little update on what we have coming for the rest of the day. We've got another panel happening after this at 2 p.m. Hosted by our very own Ariel Powers-Schaub, who is here with us. We're going to be talking about building a community and how horror brings us together. Then at 3:15 p.m, we're going to be talking about some disturbing and extreme horror films and asking the question of whether we are messed up. Probably easy to answer, but we can answer it in the chat. After that, at 4:30 p.m, we will have a pre-recorded live, well, it's not pre-recorded and live, can't be both, it's one or the other, it's pre-recorded. We've got a bloody threesome, which is not another teen pod, crossed over with Tainted Love pod, crossed over with the Ghouls, and we're going to be talking about Lisa Frankenstein. Then we have another panel at 6:15 looking at representation in horror and the voices who are championing change. And then to end the day at about 8 p.m, we're going to be getting together on Zoom for a little quiz. So if you want to join the Zoom, drop us a DM on Instagram, that's at ghouls_mag, and we will send you the link. It's limited capacity, so you've got to be in there to get the link, and then you can come. So without further ado, we're going to kick off our first panel. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, let people know a little bit about you. So I'm going to start with you, Ariel, seeing as I've already mentioned you.
Yes, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Ariel Powers-Schaub. On the socials, I'm Ari Hellraiser, and I am the administrative assistant and the brand manager for Ghouls Magazine. I've been a Ghoul since almost day one, not quite day one, but I love Ghouls, and so I was so excited when we were back at it. So thanks for being here.
Very happy to have you back. And yeah, it was nearly day one. I think
it was like day 3.
It was about day 3 with I think it was a Saw article that was your first article. I mean, what else, right?
Yeah.
Over to yourself, Iona.
Hello. It's lovely to be back. I'm Iona Walling-Smith. I have not quite been with Ghouls since day 1, but I'd say maybe year 1-ish. I am a contributor. I help with the events for London as well. And yeah, I've kind of just hang out in the background and talk everyone's ear off about Final Destination is my kind of main wheelhouse.
If there are any Final Destination fans, yeah, if you want another person to yap about it, Iona is key to all things Final Destination.
I'm just slightly obsessive, I'm not going to lie.
I mean, aren't we all, you know? And Sarah, over to you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I could not be more thrilled for Ghouls to be back. So I'm Sarah. I think much like Iona, I'm sort of year 1 Ghouls. Sort of like I heard there was horror thing going down, and I'm like, I want in. Also, like Iona, I'm helping out with events for London for Ghouls. So really excited about what we might have brewing on that front. And I am a contributor for the site as well. And I would say kind of like, I mean, my kind of wheelhouse is probably like a little bit monsters, a little bit ghosts, a little bit zombies. Yeah, I'm just always happy to talk horror, really.
And that's exactly why you're here, Sarah, because we're talking horror, you know.
Oh, I assumed you had a quota to fill.
I mean, I'm trying, you know. And last but not least, Becci.
Hello, echoing what everyone else has to say. Like, obviously thrilled to be back, thrilled to see all the Ghouls together again, talking live events, talking horror, talking everything that we do. So yeah, I'm Becci Sayce, for everyone who's ever wondered how to say my last name. I'm one of the editors over at Ghouls, editing all of the wonderful pieces you see on our website, making editorial decisions with Zoe and Ariel here. And I also do events in the Midlands with Liz, who is the reason I write for Ghouls. I mean, I think the newest Ghoul here, I think I joined 2022. So quite close to the end. Well, not the fight, not the end, but the end when we went on a hiatus, because I'd seen Liz share that you were looking for writers. I've been a journalist for forever and really wanted to get into writing horror and about film more. So took a chance on, you know, begging Zoe and Rebecca at the time to take me on, and you did. And that was the start of me writing for film.
Thank you, Becky. And on the topic of Liz as well, it is our very own Liz Bishop's birthday as well as Ghouls. So happy birthday to Liz. Sadly, she can't be with us today because obviously happy birthday. She's celebrating her birthday, as she should be, you know. And I didn't introduce myself, so I'll do that as well. I am Zoe Rose Smith. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of Ghouls. So got my fingers in many pies, doing many things and always keeping busy and just enjoying the fact that I get to spend time and chat with everyone that's here, plus all of our wonderful contributors at Ghouls talking about horror. So on that note, I want to know what first got everyone into horror. What was it that was the catalyst for you to kind of getting into this subgenre and just becoming so obsessed with it? So I'm gonna throw the question over to you, Iona, to start with.
Oh, okay. So I think the thing that first got me into horror was probably my dad. I have a really specific childhood memory of sitting in my old childhood bedroom, 4x3 telly in front of me, and him showing me the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and basically just being like, kid, sit down, shut up, learn culture. So that's kind of where it came from for me. And then I got the bug, and then from there I used to use that same 4x3 telly to watch Channel 4 at 3 in the morning when they had all the Film 4 horrors on. And that was my childhood, learning what I could get away with by watching these films in the early hours when everyone else was asleep, and kind of terrifying myself in the best way possible.
Those were the days, no, where you could, and also where you'd get a little pause break in a movie.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, the pee break and the snack breaks. I do miss them, I'm not going to lie.
I mean, bring back adverts and pauses in films, in my opinion. But, you know, thank you, Iona. Ariel, what about you? What got you into horror?
Yeah, I really, truly cannot remember a time in my life before horror. I feel like I was just born with it as a part of me. It must have been my parents who got me into it. We had lots of Stephen King books on the shelves growing up and lots of Universal horror monster VHS tapes. So those are the shelves that I remember. And we went camping a lot and we told scary stories around the campfire. And so I just feel like horror was always my preferred genre for fun. And so, it's just never not been there.
It's I love that. I love the fact that it's you were born with it. I mean, were your parents into horror? Are they horror fans as well?
Yeah, they were. It's I feel like my mom, she just recently told me she's really into zombies, which I didn't know. So I took her to see the Bone Temple, but I was like, really? That's new information for me. But yeah, horror stories were always welcomed. We were really into Halloween as a family too. So I just feel like I was meant to be a creepy person.
From day one. I love it. Sarah, what about you?
I would say for me, my horror journey kind of actually began more with books. So Goosebumps, Reader Beware, You're In for a Scare. Fairly certain that the first one of those I ever read was Let's Get Invisible, which was about a mirror that could turn you invisible, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then kind of as I got older, it was the trips down the road to the video shop, the video rental, that sacred bastion that is no longer with us. And yeah, that was just kind of how I started to watch things the Terrible Haunting remake, because I didn't know any better. I was a kid. And of course, Blair Witch Project. That was definitely like a seminal work for me in terms of my horror education. And then the other things kind of like coming on. Like after that, Ring, just the whole J horror boom was like such a big thing for me. And it's just grown since. And I mean, even like also as a kid, I loved ghost stories. And I would read like those sort of like the Osborne Book of Ghosts and Hauntings and all of those sorts of things with all the pictures and stuff. And my favorite was always this one of like a sort of floor plan, like old floor plan versus new floor plan of a house that would show the routes ghosts would have taken while they were alive, but because walls have changed and that's why ghosts walk through walls kind of thing. Like I that just kind of like blew my mind as a kid. But no, it's so yeah, kind of like it sort of grew from like these childhood stories, and now it is something like it's just such a big part of my life.
I was also a big fan of those ghost stories. I remember my grandma used to take me to, and I don't know if it was the same as you, like little like pokey kind of like witchy shops, and they'd always have like real ghost story books, and I was like, I've got to read those and then be fucking terrified every night afterwards,
There was like this one collection of ghost stories that I got from the library a few times, and that had like some absolutely crazy ones, and they also had like this poem about like a Cthulhu type thing coming out of the sea to eat everybody.
We love a Cthulhu. We love Cthulhu. And Becci, what about you?
So similar to Ariel, like I don't remember a time that I wasn't into horror. I was a very creepy kid. I was always into like ghosts and monsters, and my kids are exactly the same. So I almost feel like it's in my DNA, sort of. Like again, I remember the Stephen King books that belonged to my mum on the shelf. I remember being far too young watching Mars Attacks with my nan and being absolutely terrified of it, and just sort of got the bug from there, that feeling of being entertained but being scared. And similar to Sarah, I remember one of the first films that really frightened me that I remember speaking about on the Horror and Her podcast was the American remake of The Ring. Like it scared me so much. I had nightmares for weeks. And it was just sort of from there that I really started watching like the classic monster movies, slasher films. Scream again really got me into writing about horror more so than just watching horror. And it all sort of stemmed from there.
Yeah, it's I guess it just kind of like continues from there, right? Like you said, and obviously you've got two daughters, Becci. Are you pushing them into getting into horror now?
I don't feel like I've needed to push them. Like I'm telling you guys constantly the weird things that both of my daughters say about ghosts and goblins. Like we can't take a walk anywhere. I took them out to the park not that long ago, and they said, "Oh, tell me a story." And I tried to tell them this nice woodland animal story. My eldest turned around and went, "No, I want one about ghosts in the trees." Right, okay then. That's fine. So, like I say, I feel like it's almost been passed down somehow, like it's in my genetics.
I guess it's very similar to Ariel's experience. If your parents are into it, kind of trickles down. And I think for me, my dad was a huge horror fan. Now, for some reason, he says it's made by the devil or something. I was like, isn't that the point? But he was always showing me horror films. Not until I was maybe about 14 that I saw The Evil Dead, and I was like, oh my god, this is so scary. This is horrible. And then it was at a Halloween party, and me and my friend tried to then borrow like one of those old school cams and go around the party and make like our own little found footage thing. Don't know what happened to it. It's like lost footage now, similar to something like Event Horizon. But yeah, it was very much in my family. And then I think when I got older, I started, looking into the more extreme side of things. And I think for me, that was really where it became like very much embedded, because I was like, oh, wow, you could watch movies that feel like you're watching like a genuine snuff movie. And this is fucking horrible. And then it just spiraled. And here we are, right? We are through and through horror lovers. And I think that brings us nicely into kind of our main topic for today, which is looking at why horror matters so much in our current landscape. Obviously, the world is the world right now. We can't say, well, we're all having a good time. We're probably all having a bit of a shit time. But I want to know from you all, why do you think horror is so important right now in kind of our current landscape and what we're seeing around us. And Becci, I'll throw that over to you first.
I think at the very core of it, horror has always been for misfits, and horror has always been political. And when we look at the world as it is, like we've got people here from the UK and also from the US, our political landscape at the moment it's intolerable. It's toxic. It's hateful. People are fearing for their lives every single day, and they shouldn't be. You shouldn't be terrified to exist. And I feel like horror has always been at the forefront of tackling these feelings of disenfranchisement and danger and fighting against these oppressive systems in place that really shouldn't be. And I mean, it's such a shame that we're still having to fight this fight, but I feel like it's comforting to know that we are a part of a genre that is consistently pushing for marginalized voices to be recognized.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to, you know, what our core purpose is here at Ghouls, isn't it? Is, you know, we all banded together in a time, you know, when we first set Ghouls up, it was COVID. It was, again, not a great time that we set Ghouls up, and, you know, it was very much to kind of, one, you know, bring marginalized voices to the forefront and show that there was more than just certain people talking about horror, but also, you know, to connect us and kind of create that, I guess, safety during a time of uncertainty. Sarah, what are your thoughts on kind of, you know, why horror is so important right now?
I mean, it is like, I am a little bit echoing what you guys said, sort of, you know, we live in a blasted hellscape. And I mean, honestly, for me, horror has always been about confronting things and working through things. And it's like, one, people always find it funny that I'm into horror because I have anxiety problems. But for me, horror is almost a safe place where you can feel those anxieties, feel those fears, and you can walk away afterwards. That is like, it's a safe space, basically. Like you can feel those emotions, and then you can walk away afterwards. Whereas you can't really walk away from what's happening in the world. But also it's because, I mean, yeah, we all love like the silly side of horror. We love it when a crazy kill happens. We all love a bit of gnarly special effects. But when horror says something, as well as scaring you, as well as grossing you out, when it says something that makes you sit there and think, oh, wow, kind of like gives you a perspective on something. I mean, I sort of, like I mentioned, like my love of zombie movies. I mean, George Romero's kind of original Dead trilogy were very much kind of reactions to the times they were being made in, with Night of the Living Dead and sort of racial tensions, issue like views on the traditional family. Then you have Dawn of the Dead with consumerism and everything. And I think that horror lets you say something. It lets you kind of see something that's happening in the world and reflect on it, and using the scariness to kind of really sort of dig in and like make you confront it, make you unable to ignore it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right with not being able to ignore horror. And I loved your point just talking around kind of creating this safe space, right? And this kind of catharsis, because I think we see time and time again in horror that, you know, there's some topics that are pretty heavy topics or taboo topics, but it's about being able to kind of find that release on screen. And again, as you said, Sarah, being able to walk away from it and go, oh, okay, I've digested it there and I can walk away from that. Whereas, yeah, unfortunately, we cannot walk away from the atrocities of human life. And actually reminds me, I watched Threads the other night, and I watched that and I went, oh, fucking hell, that's yeah. I was like, that just feels way too relevant right now. So
I've been meaning to finally watch that. I've never seen Threads, but I'm meaning to, even though I know it's going to bum me out.
I don't know. Wait, I mean, you know me, I'll push anything horrible, but Threads is a particular kind of horrible. So anyone anyone that's watching that hasn't seen Threads, this is not a recommendation from us. You do you. You know, enter at your own peril. Ariel, what about you?
Yes. Well, you can probably tell from my accent that I'm in the United States, and I am just absolutely horrified at what's going on in the United States right now. Just for the record, fuck ICE. We need ICE out. And I think horror is the genre that's best suited to hold up a mirror to culture and society and force us to reflect. It is the genre that is best suited to do that because you can take things to an extreme. You can take a point all the way to its logical extreme end and say, look, if you think this is horrible, isn't that sort of what's like going on over here? Don't be desensitized to what's going on over here. If you were horrified by this atrocity, that's similar to this atrocity. And that's why we need horror stories constantly evolving, so they can always show us a mirror of what's going on in society and what do we need to get away from. Anyone who knows me knows that my wheelhouse is 2000s horror, that era of torture porn and Millenial Nasties. And the movies of that time, particularly Western horror, English language horror, was holding up a mirror to the forever war that was started then after 9/11 and the torture tactics that were being done illegally by soldiers to people who, you know, nobody deserves to be tortured. And we were seeing those things on our TVs, on the news, and we weren't reacting to them, but we were reacting to torture that was happening fictionally on our screens. And so it was a way for people to confront, don't you see the horror here? And aren't you sickened by it? And why are you more sickened by what's fictional than what is really happening? I think, you know, hopefully the time that we're in right now will come to an end the way that the 2000s came to an end eventually. And we, you know, went on to do something else. I do wonder how we'll look back at this time in history on horror cinema and see the ways that it was reflecting back what's going on.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you know mentioned that point, and obviously, Ariel, like you said, you know, it's great that we can bring your perspective from the US, you know, our perspective from the UK, and I mean the sad thing is that we're seeing across the world that, you know, they're not localized issues, but like you said, you know, it's very cultural, isn't it, what we see? And I mean, I guess we'll be waiting for more books from you, Ariel, on the films that, you know, shaped the last kind of 20 years since the 2000s.
Don't worry, they're coming.
And Iona, what about you? So obviously, I completely agree with everything that's been said so far as well. I also think that it's worth flagging that I see horror as almost an act of rebellion as well. There is that kind of feeling of rebellion that you get with horror, even when it's popular within the mainstream, as a kind of, I'd say, almost putting up a middle finger to society and being like, fuck you, you're not letting me kind of do what I want within society, therefore we're going to replicate it to the extreme in the horror. So, for example, if you look at, say, a rape revenge film, you're looking at a horrible occurrence that's happened to a singular character. That character is getting the visceral justice that you feel like should be deserved. It's in a way that is obviously something that would be quite criminal in real life, but the whole instance of it and the whole situation is criminal in real life. So it's pushing that to the extreme, showing that rebellious side and being like, basically. But there's also, I think it's worth mentioning that horror is really important for our landscape at the minute because of a source of escapism. I know obviously it helps us to face traumas that we perhaps wouldn't be comfortable dealing with in real life, but there is also the fun side of horror, let's say, where you get that visceral enjoyment, you get to kind of go a bit buck wild with it. And it's a source of kind of an energy release for certain people. I mean, you guys know I am a absolute trash panda when it comes to finding my films. I love something that is so bad. I know, Ari, I love you too, girl. we are kindred spirits in this. And I feel like it's one of those things where I sometimes just want to put on a really trashy, really campy, over the top gore fest as a way to escape the shit that's happening outside. I just
Mhm.
love those moments where I'm fully locked into a film that is, I'm not saying in any way a well-made film sometimes it's really not. But I love the absolute distraction, the absolute moment of being able to just witness this, just lock into this and forget about the world. Like, I feel like that's one of the really important things that horror brings to us, especially nowadays.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it's definitely that escapism. And Iona, whilst you probably watch, your trash panda movies, as you call them, I think I do slightly opposite to you, and I've often watched something like Snowtown as a form to escape, because I'm like, well, if the world's awful out there, let's watch something that's even more awful and see if that makes you feel better. Sometimes
Mhm.
does, sometimes
Same.
doesn't.
Saying that, though, you are the reason that I've started watching some of those things now as well, because you really kind of opened my perspective to that. You were like, Iona hasn't really done any of the extreme or any of the bleak horror. Let's see how far we can push her. And you've
I do
pushed me, and it's been
apologise.
good. No, I love it. It's my favorite.
I apologise to everyone I've tried to traumatise. It comes from a place of endearment, you know.
You do it because you love us.
Exactly. I think the other thing for me in terms of, you know, why horror is so important is kind of that community. Again, you know, going to the back to the point that, you know, the reason we started Ghouls during COVID was, you know, most people were looking for connection and connection with people that we had, you know, common ground with. And I think even now, even though we've moved out, you know, of that kind of pandemic phase, I think we're still in an odd kind of post-pandemic phase where, you know, a lot of us work from home, a lot of us don't get to travel as much, you know, there's implications and consequences that have kind of stayed. So we're still looking for that connectivity. And I think, you know, just diving back into the horror world, and even, you know, with our Ghouls relaunch, that community has come back so, you know, vividly and beautifully. And, you know, we're all kind of going through the same stuff. It's almost like a, you know, therapy session, or I think we often refer to it, don't we, as kind of like the midsummer group cry, where everyone's just in the trauma together. We're kind of trauma bonding, but, you know, through the avenue of horror. And on kind of that topic around community, and again, you know, going back to the point I think you made it, Becci, about kind of marginalized voices, how do you see that horror is an avenue to bring to the forefront, you know, marginalized voices and talk about these topics that are so pressing and so important? And I'm going to ask you, Ariel, for your thoughts on that first.
Yeah. Well, I think any type of horror that you're talking about, if it's a book or a movie or a story of any kind, the idea is that there's some other often. And so whether that other is a hero or a villain, we're always talking about stories where there's an other. And so even just bringing to the forefront that there's an us and a them is a way to start that conversation. And when you go back to like original monster movies, you see that a lot of the monsters are actually not monstrous, but they're just misunderstood. And so I think horror is a great genre to look at. Why are we othering this individual or this group? And is it because there's actually a problem here, or is it a misunderstanding? And if we bridge a gap, could we actually build a better community? And so horror fans, as we recognize that, we hopefully become more welcoming to other horror fans and say, hey, if you're a weirdo, I'm a weirdo. Let's go be weirdos together.
Well, what's the quote? We're all weirdos here, mister. Is that the quote?
We are the weirdos.
We are the weirdos.
There we go. We absolutely are. Iona, what about you?
I think in terms of championing marginalized groups and voices, I think it's really important to keep in mind that there is a constant shift in the people that are kind of at the forefront of the marginalization, I think. And I think that horror is a really good way to reflect what is happening kind of in the outside world, as we've kind of already discussed. I think that horror as a political statement is potentially the most important kind of aspect of the genre itself when it comes to pointing out the kind of marginalized voices and also bringing them into the fold. I think it's very important to keep that in mind as we kind of go through decade to decade and look at, as Ariel said, the comparisons from the old monster movies to the social conversations we're having now. I think overall, the kind of mirror that's giving us and the messages that it's giving us kind of keeps us within, I guess, our modern day framework. So yeah, I think in terms of marginalized voices and kind of championing them at the moment, I've seen a lot of championing of people of color. I've seen a lot of championing of varied sexualities as well happening a lot in recent days. And I think that obviously the further we can delve into that, the better. I think kind of having that reflection and having those messages put across in a way that people perhaps wouldn't be used to consuming as well is really important.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And what about you, Becci?
I think when we look at horror, obviously we have our big budget horrors and our big studio horrors, but more often than not, horror is not on the same level as like your MCUs or the next big like Christopher Nolan film. Very often horror is on the back foot. I mean, we see it often in like the big awards ceremonies. We have this conversation every year about horror being snubbed. Less so this year, of course, but we have it every single year that horror is sort of turned away by the mainstream. But I think because of that, we're a lot less governed by the mainstream and what you would expect from these like big budget Marvel slop superhero films than you would a horror film. And it means that people can get a bit more experimental by it and they're a lot less silenced by it. So it means that the things that maybe Disney wouldn't want you to see, like, you know, a gay person on your screen because they don't exist in Disney, apparently. The things that studios like that don't want you to see is a lot more commonplace in horror.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it, that we're starting to see, you know, more and more kind of representation on screen across, you know, and horror's really the only one doing it. Like you said, you know, Disney are not, for sure, nor other places. And Sarah, what about you?
Well, I mean, Becky, you mentioned awards, and I mean, we're in the midst of an award season where Sinners is the most nominated movie in Oscars history. And you think even like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like the idea of a Black-led horror movie, which is very much about Black history, about Black culture, about sort of culture as lifeblood, and particularly now when so many people in America, their sort of identity and culture is being challenged, like that would have been unthinkable. Like, and here it is, it's like the biggest sort of film in the award season, and that's amazing. Like, and you also kind of like we've few of us have kind of like mentioned about monster movies. Like at the moment we are in this resurgence of the classic monsters, and in previous times they've very much been like you said, Ariel, the other. And there is definitely in a lot of society a lot of demonizing of what is other, and so the fact that you know these classic monsters are coming back is very much, it's not a coincidence kind of thing. I mean, you know, last few years we have had I think pretty much all of the classic monster movie monsters have come back in some form or another, and I think that is a very telling that cycle has kind of come around and around again.
Yeah, we see that, don't we? It's like this kind of continuous cycle and refreshing of themes, which, you know, in many ways it feels quite sad that we, you know, we live in an existence where that kind of happens. But I think the other thing for me that I've really seen an increase in lately is, you know, other, whether it's, creators themselves, whether it's magazines, whether it's influencers, whether it's filmmakers pushing, or even, film festivals. And I think, in our next panel, Ariel, is going to be, part of the conversation, is that, we're trying to push these stories and these perspectives that previously we haven't had, and do make such a difference to how we interpret horror. We obviously approach everything with our own kind of lens, and I think it's not until we really see it through the lens of other people that we begin to understand that actually, the horror is very different for many different people. And I think, I'm loving seeing some amazing people out there, bring those voices to the forefront and really kind of support one another, which is, what horror essentially is all about. And we spoke a little bit there. I think, Iona, you mentioned kind of some of the, the themes that we're starting to see in these films, whether it's sexuality, etc. There's things like motherhood. I want to know from your kind of perspectives, what are those maybe like key themes and topics that you're seeing that are horror's allowing us to kind of really explore more so? I'm going to start with you, Becci.
I think the main one that I think will jump to everyone's mind when you think of modern horror at the moment is, of course, grief. Grief has very much it's come from the backseat of a lot of horror films to being at the very forefront of the narrative. Like, we've had things like Hereditary, Midsummer, The Babadook, all looking at grief from very different angles, but not as a background like theme. It's very much a central character. And I feel like a lot of that is because the amount of death we're seeing every single day on the news, on front covers of newspapers, that is incredibly graphic. Like, it's the sort of things you'd see in your extreme horror films, but worse, and it's real. Like, we're seeing severed limbs, exploded cities, like some of the world's worst atrocities, and we're dealing with death in a way that I think is unprecedented every single day. So I feel like that's the main theme that we're seeing a lot in horror, and I feel like it is almost becoming a way not only for filmmakers and creatives to process the trauma that they're seeing, but as a way for audiences to connect and see how to deal with death, because we're dealing with death, I think, from an even younger age, and dealing with it in a way that it's not like a close family member dying or someone that dying. It's seeing death on a large scale every single day. And it's unrelenting because of social media, because of the news cycle. We're being bombarded by it. And it's more horrific than what we're seeing in horror films.
Yeah, grief is one that's, I mean, it's been, the last kind of 10 years, hasn't it? It's been kind of grief and trauma. And I know a few people have, I know there's conversations of, oh, do we need more of it? But like you said, Becci, and until we stop having that kind of collective grief and trauma, it's going to show up in horror. Ariel, what about you?
Yes. Well, I was thinking specifically about the 28 Years Later movies, and I think they're a great example of some post-COVID horror. And there are other examples of that too, and I feel like we'll see more of it, where zombie movies have historically been really good, like we talked about it, pointing out like racism and classism, and they can still be good at that. I think something I've appreciated about the 28 Years Later movies is post-outbreak, how are we getting through this? What in our society broke, and how we've not completely rebuilt, and there's people who are doing better than others. And so I'm really interested to see more of that as we get farther and farther away from what lockdown was and what lockdown felt like. And we're still going to forever be processing the grief of those who we lost during the pandemic. I think we're going to see more post-pandemic horror.
A random question, but do you think people are going to end up feeling tired of it? Because there's been some discourse, hasn't there, between people going, don't remind us of kind of the pandemic. Do you think it's going to die down, or it's just going to take a different kind of shape?
I think it might take a different shape. It doesn't have to specifically be, here was a virus outbreak and here's what we're doing now. Those themes can show up in other ways in horror movies of, here was this global event that happened and now here's how we're dealing with it. Or it could be really individual stories. Here's a very personal event that happened and now here's how I'm dealing with it. And like any trend, there's going to be people who like it more than others, and there's going to be people who get really sick of it. But I think it's it's a necessary way. Like we were talking about, we need horror to process what goes on globally. I think we're going to need to be doing that.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. Sarah, what about you?
Well, I mean, and also kind of like jumping off some of the stuff you were saying, Ari, about like sort of like COVID horror and the 28 Years films. It was like, it was made before COVID, but one film that really kind of struck a chord with me about what it was like in the pandemic was The Night Eats the World, which is this set in Paris zombie movie. And it's very much kind of about isolation and the toll of isolation and things like that. And I think that really kind of, even though it came before it really hit the emotional landscape of that time. And I think that essentially kind of like going forwards, we're going to, maybe not things that are directly tied to the pandemic, but definitely shifting. I think that a lot of films that are coming up in particular focus on identity in sort kind of like trying to find the best way to word it, sort of like horror related to identity in the current sort of world sphere. Really not wording that well, but, and I mean, one filmmaker who I think has really their films have kind of found a way of saying things that are just kind of really hard to articulate, much like how I cannot articulate myself very well right now, is going to horribly mispronounce them, Jane Schoenbrunn. Is that how you say it? Who did We're All Going to the World's Fair. I saw The TV Glow, and they've got a new film coming out this year. And I think their films kind of, they really kind of hit something internally in a lot of people, and in a way that is very hard to express.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's I like the point around kind of identity. I think that's a huge thing at the moment, and again, kind of considering that we're in a landscape where people feel a lot more free in some ways to be their true selves and share their identity, but in many other ways completely oppressed at the same time. So it's absolutely there. And Iona, what about you?
I mean, kind of jumping off something that Sarah kind of started, I think that one of the things that I've seen a lot in horror, obviously we have the horror of the current landscape, but you have also got the kind of a horror of the permanent presence. So I'm seeing a lot of like influencer and social media kind of themed horror, and the fact that we can't escape nowadays. There is nowhere for you to go. You are constantly present. You are across social media. You are across your normal life. And it's the way that you're kind of presented, I guess, as a person. And I think focusing on that kind of aesthetic and that beauty and that terror of the constant inundation of the social media and the information and the need to be present within that at all times is really starting to be reflected in horror as well. So obviously we had things like The Substance, which focused on the kind of the fear of the aging and the constant need for the beautiful aesthetic as interpreted by in society rather than the individual. But you also have that just kind of ingrained in general horror films now. So especially if it's focused on people who are of like late teens, early 20s, that kind of era of horror is really fixating in on the need to constantly present yourself. And I think it's a really important message. And at the same time, it's something we really need to take heed of. I think it's something we need to start being aware of a lot more.
Yeah, the whole, I mean, I read a scary stat the other day that apparently anyone having children now, they're going to be one of the least intelligent generations that we've had for a long time, which, you know, in itself is a bit of a horror. And I think, you know, I think to your point, Sarah, kind of around identity is a key one, you know, sexuality, gender. We've got topics, you know, talking a lot more about mental health that we, you know, see in horror. There's disability. There's so many avenues that horror is allowing us to like explore and, you know, talk about these issues that often haven't really, you know, aren't really spoken about, or feel like that it's uncomfortable to be able to approach those. And I think that's why horror's, you know, such a beautiful genre, that it does give us that avenue. And I've got one final question for you all, and then we're going to start wrapping up our discussion for today. But how do you see the future of horror being shaped? And I'll kick it straight back to you, Iona.
I think in terms of like the future of horror, I think there's a bit of a disconnect for me with what I want to see and what I think we're seeing. Personally, what I want to see is more stories for the she's, the theys, and the gays. Let's be honest. That is, I mean, in terms of our group, that is what we love, what we champion. I would really, really like to start seeing more horror voices from the trans and non-binary community. We're slowly but surely starting to see that space opening up, but I just don't think it's quick enough, personally. I think there needs to be more space. There needs to be more accessibility, I think, for creatives in that aspect. Obviously, in terms of what we're seeing, horror is perpetually cyclical. Like, we are constantly seeing these shifts and these trends coming round and round again. So who knows? I think the future of horror could be a relapse of something we've had before, or it could be a completely fresh take on a subject that we're perhaps trying to lean into at the moment, but we're not quite there yet.
Absolutely. And we just had a comment from Mitch, who runs Soho Horror Film Festival, which on the topic of, you know, non-binary and queer, etc. stories, a film festival in London that is very much pushing those stories and those filmmakers. So if you haven't heard of Soho Horror Film Festival, do check them out. Just a perfect timing there, Mitch. What about you, Sarah?
Well, I mean, again, it is kind of like you said, Iona, it's like what you want to see versus how it's probably going to go. I mean, like, I think there's some things that are always going to be in horror that is always going to show up. I think as much as I roll my eyes at it, I think we're always going to have like the Blumhouse formula jump scare popcorn kind of horror. I think there's no getting away from that. We just kind of have to live with it a bit. But I mean, definitely, I think that there's a whole world of stories from people out there of sort of like outside of the typical sort of like white straight identity that I could really like just open up the horror genre and give whole new perspectives that I would love to see more of. And I think we're probably going to get a lot more, even more of this kind of the influence of the online social media type of horror. And I think probably a lot of AI horror is we are starting to get bits of that, but I think there's going to be even more around the corner.
Our favorite topic, AI. What about you, Becci?
I think we're in a very exciting time for horror at the moment. We're seeing more horror films in the cinemas than ever before. We're seeing them smash box office records. As we've already mentioned, Sinners is now the most nominated Oscar film of all time. And then we've also got things like The Ugly Stepsister, a tiny indie horror film about body horror in the Oscars. We've got Begonia. We've got, you know, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which I know is like tangentially horror. We've got Frankenstein. Like, I think we're really seeing horror pushed to the forefront at the moment and having its moment. But my worry with that is it will become safer. Like I sort of touched on earlier, horror has always been a platform for the risky messages, the people that are shunned to the sidelines to tell their stories. And my worry with horror having the moment that it is at the moment is that it'll become safer and more sanitized. And I want to continue seeing stories that really push boundaries, like we mentioned The Substance, as much as, you know, I've got my opinions about The Substance, but it was a big thing. Like the messages that it was saying and how it was doing it was huge for horror. We've got The Bone Temple and 28 Years Later that are pushing messages about like colonialism, COVID, British identity, Brexit, like other films don't. And I want to continue seeing stories that make us confront things that we don't want to. And basically films that make boomers say, like, we shouldn't have this in our cinemas, we can't let our kids watch this. I want to continue seeing those narratives rather than, like we say, like your Blumhouse haunted puppet movies that aren't necessarily saying the same sort of thing. Whether I'm right and it will get safer or not, I really hope I'm wrong. And I hope we do continue seeing these stories that make everyone uncomfortable and make people look at themselves and look at society and think, oh, I don't like this, but I'm complicit in it.
Absolutely. And Ariel, what about you?
Well, I wouldn't be me if I didn't bring up on-screen violence. So as much as horror is cyclical, absolutely. One of the cycles is how much are we showing in our horror movies? We go through periods of time where the horror is in what we don't see, which is wonderful. And we go through periods of time where the horror is in what we do see, which is also wonderful. And we're due for some violence. I think it's coming back. You know, the Evil Dead movies, the Terrifier movies, which are political, for the record. Art is always political, even when it's Art the Clown. I think that horror audiences are ready to see more on-screen violence, and we're seeing that come up in the indie horror movies. And I think hopefully that makes its way to the big screen. I think that's a good point, Becci, about it, us worried that it's being safer, but we're always going to have indie filmmakers who want to make something horrible for us to look at. My favorite movie of last year was Meat Kills, which was an independent horror movie out of the Netherlands. And it was the first movie in the Netherlands to ever receive an NC-17 rating. And so if we could do that in 2025, I've got some hope for violent horror movies for the future. I think one thing we can all take comfort in is that horror will always be there, and it will always be a mirror for our society. And so no matter what it looks like, we're always going to have it to fall back on.
I 100% agree, and I am also wishing for more violence on screen. I think, again, as someone that likes the more extreme side of things, and Abba from Fangoria just reminded us of Faces of Death, which is coming, because I mean I've been saying where's the more extreme stuff, considering it's probably the right time to be seeing more on-screen violence, like you said, Ariel. So thank you all for joining me today. We're running slightly behind, so I'm going to wrap things up here. It's a topic we could probably talk all day about, but unfortunately we haven't got all day for this particular topic. But obviously you can find us all across social media, where we continue talking about these topics through our various works. So I'll just do a quick round robin and ask everyone if you can share where people can follow you and find your work. So Ariel.
At Ari_Hellraiser on Instagram and Blue Sky and Letterboxd. And if you're interested in 2000s horror, you can check out my book, Millenial Nasties.
Thank you. Becci?
You can find me at Becci Sayce on Instagram and Letterboxd, and BL Sayce Writes at Blue Sky and Twitter if you still use it. And you can find all of my writing at Ghouls Magazine, Filmhounds, Metro UK, Digital Spy, Fangoria, and in the link tree in all of my bios for all my bylines.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, you can find my writing on Ghouls. You can usually find me chatting nonsense over on Blue Sky at Sarah Jo Miles, or I'm on Letterboxd at Sarah Jo Smiley. And you can also find an essay I wrote recently on the second site release of Maxine.
Thank you very much. And Iona?
So you can find me at full_out_Iona across pretty much all social media platforms. I would particularly recommend my Letterboxd, where I basically just shit talk my husband for the films that he makes me watch. And yeah, you can find my writing at Ghouls Magazine. I dabble every now and then at Filmhounds as well, if you want to check me out there. I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. And we are going to be back in about 10 minutes. We'll push it by 5 minutes so everyone can grab a coffee and run to the toilet, you know, the small luxuries of life. Ariel is going to be hosting a panel on building a community, how horror brings us together. And we're going to be joined by Sick Girls Film Club, the Nottingham Horror Collective, Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, and Mental Health Monsters. So it's going to be a great panel. So we will see you soon. Thank you so much.